Aloha. Hi, Kaimana. Papa loves you. Thank you. 1970, a production company was here in the Hawaiian Islands shooting a show for the ABC network called
The Hawaii Experience.
The Hawaii Experience, Kalamai. So, people involved were Bob Crane. And Bob Crane, if you don't know, was a star of an old TV show called Hogan's Heroes and a Disney movie called Superdad. And so the Hawaii Experience involved a lot of things, but it also involved them delving into the supernatural in Hawaii. The producer himself admits that from the beginning, what they should have done was consulted a kahuna, or some sort of practitioner, to give permission or bless the project, which they failed to do. As the show went on shooting, someone began to dub the producer himself the White Kahuna, which a lot of locals and Hawaiians didn't like. It didn't sit well with them. Almost from the beginning, the production was beset with problems. They were shooting a segment at the Pele Lookout in the middle of the day. The $50,000 camera, with no one around it, fell over and shattered into a million pieces. One of the partners for the production embezzled all the money. The producer himself ended up having to mortgage his house in order to have the show complete itself. They traveled to the Big Island. They were shooting a segment at a place called the Wahaula Heiau, the oldest and most powerful heiau in the entirety of the archipelago, built and dedicated by the priest, the kahuna, Pa'ao, who himself came from Samoa. And so technically, when Pa'ao came and began to examine the way the people lived, the first people who were here, looked at our lifestyle, the way we did things, he went back to the South Pacific and brought back with him the mass migration. When he came, he introduced the Ali'i class system and the practice of human sacrifice. The first noted person of Samoan ancestry to have come here. Well, when they were filming this segment at the old Wahaula Heiau, which is a heiau of human sacrifice, Bob Crane and some of the people can see that the locals and the Hawaiians working on the set have brought Hawaiian salt and tea leaf for protection, in case they mistakenly did something hewa or wrong. The people that day who were on the set said that Bob Crane himself became irritated by the locals and their superstitions. And so, in full view of every local and Hawaiian person there, Bob Crane and another friend of his dropped their pants and began to mimi, began to do number one, all over the walls of that ancient temple of human sacrifice. You can only imagine how horrified everybody was to see this. The next day, they were at Halema'uma'u crater. And of course, that segment was about the goddess Pele. And again, Bob Crane becomes irritated at the locals and the Hawaiians on the set, who again have brought Hawaiian salt, who have brought tea leaf, who have offered gin and other kinds of ho'okupu to the goddess Pele. In full defiance of these practices, Bob Crane and another friend of his drop their pants and do number two, right at the rim of the crater, in defiance of the goddess Pele. Back home in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, the producer is having a hard time with the editing, because a lot of the voice segments, as they were shooting, didn't quite take. The sound wasn't working. And so he would have needed Bob Crane to come back to the studio to do some overdubs. He said literally, when he put the tape in for the editing into the machine, literally, the machine spit the tape out. Bob Crane himself was never able to make the voiceover sessions, because as the producer found out, Bob Crane was found in a hotel room with the back of his head bashed in. He was so badly mangled from his face that he was unrecognizable. And the only way they knew that it was Bob Crane in that room is because it was registered to him. And they found his identification on his body. You're asking yourself, what's so unusual about that? Well, the unusual thing is that the aihamu, the executioner of the old Wahaula Hale, would watch as the fires were lit from inside the heiau. If the smoke that came from the fire went without the walls of Wahaula, and it happened to touch someone who was passing by, the aihamu would kill that person on the spot, but in a very specific way. Have them lay flat, facing down, hands bound behind their back, and have the back of their head bashed in again and again. The mere coincidence? Or was it the old heiau, the mana, or even the aihamu, doing what they always did to people who disrespected or violated the kapu? My late mentor, Glenn Grant, talks about a production company from Japan who is here in Hawaii to promote their pork product. And for one particular segment, because they heard about Glenn and what he did as far as telling ghost stories, they wanted to film him at the Pele Lookout, holding up their pork item, talking about it, promoting it. But they didn't tell him until he got to the Pele Lookout. And so the director says, you hold the pork like this, and here is what you say, and you promote our product. And Glenn Grant himself said, not sure if I should be doing this. It's rather disrespectful. The director from Japan says, oh, no, don't worry, it's okay, you just do it. Just hold the pork like this, and you say what's on the paper. And Glenn said, you don't understand. There's a meridian where the pork is not supposed to pass. And I'm thinking to myself where that meridian is. And he said, where I'm standing is the place where I think, where I believe, the pork is not supposed to be. It's supposed to be further that way, as Glenn Grant points down the road that goes down the old Pele Lookout. He said, further that way. It's okay if we shoot over there, but over here, I don't think so. This is Pele's side of the island, and the pork representing the god Kamapua'a is not supposed to be here. And the director is now irritated, mad, and frustrated, and says, you just take the pork, hold like this. You read what is on the paper. He rushes behind the camera, and the wind rips through the Pele Lookout, tears the slab of pork out of my boss's hands, and everybody watches as it spins end over end and smashes right into the lens of the $1 million camera, shattering it and making it fall right on its side. A friend of mine named Norman Reifsnyder has long since passed away, I believe in 1993. He was 42 years old at the time. We were friends of an organization that I belonged to called Soka. We're the type of friends that would hang around a lot, not see each other for almost a year, hang out again like nothing ever happened. Just pick up where we left off. And on some nights, we would stay at his studio on Wilder Avenue, drinking sake. And for those of you who know about sake, if you prepare it warm, it's a really great sip. But the second you stand up is when it takes full effect. Well, one night, we're sitting in his old Wilder Street studio, and he tells me about the time when he first arrived to the islands. He'd come from Santa Barbara. He was living with some friends in Kalihi, and he got a job at the Old Gems on Dillingham, and was going to Kapiolani Community College at the same time. He said one day when he was coming from class, heading to work, on one of the bulletin boards, he saw a giant flyer that said, auditions for the Broadway show, Jesus Christ Superstar. It was being produced at McKinley High School. And so, with a background in art and dance and theater, he decided to go and audition. And he said he didn't get any major parts, but he ended up being one of the line captains. He said the day of the audition was sort of strange because there were only two people sitting in the audience, the director and the dance choreographer. The dance choreographer in the dark wore shades or dark glasses. And after the process was over and the director assigned Norman to be the line captain, the choreographer, who didn't introduce himself, walked up to Norman and said, "Not bad. Not great, but not bad." And that was it. And then he went to his job at the Gems department store. A couple of days later is the very first rehearsal that Norman shows up for, and he's very early. When he gets to the theater, he notices no one's around. And when he's walking around backstage, he says he sees someone standing under some steps. They're just hiding inside the shadow. When he steps forward, he says, "Hello? Is somebody there?" The person stepping out of the shadow is the dance choreographer. And he walks up to Norman and says, "My name is Pohai. What's your name again?" And of course Norman says, "I'm Norman." My old friend tells me at that point there were no words exchanged, no pleasantries. He said, without a doubt, Pohai grabbed me, pulled me underneath the steps, into the shadows, and literally started to tear my clothes off and tried to rape me. He said, I was so flabbergasted and so horrified. My natural reaction was to lash out. And so I punched him in the eye, and I went home, took off. I was pretty sure that Pohai was going to tell the director, and I was out of the production, and that was fine with me. Except Norman said that he got a call the following day from the director. All he said was, "Rife Snyder, be there tonight, on time." I'm not kicked out? No, but be there. And so, promptly, Norman shows up for the rehearsal. Everyone is gathered on the stage at McKinley High School. They're all standing in a circle holding hands. And so the director sees him and says, "Rife Snyder, over here." He joins the circle, holds hands with a couple of cast members, and he sees standing next to the director, Pohai, with his dark glasses. The director says, "The one thing I will not tolerate in this production is violence and harassment. I won't tolerate backtalk or rumors. If I find out that's going on, you're out of this production." The director then turns to Pohai standing next to him and says, "Pohai, apologize to Rife Snyder." Dramatically, Pohai walks over to Norman, takes off his dark glasses, dramatically reveals his black eye, extends his hand out and says, "I'm sorry." And as they shake hands, he turns around and joins the circle. The rehearsal goes fine. And at the end, when Norman is leaving the theater, the director's head pops out of the door, his office, and says, "Rife Snyder, in here." Nervously, Norman says he walked into the director's office, and when he saw Pohai sitting on the other side of the director's desk, he initially turned around to leave, but the director said, "Hold on. Pohai would like to give you a more detailed apology, if you don't mind." And then the director turned to Pohai and said, "If I was not in need of a choreographer, and if you were not the most talented actor, singer, and dancer, your ass would be on the street. So, apologize." Pohai stands up and comes from behind the desk, and he's holding a bag, from Villa Roma and puts it on the desk in front of Norman and says, I am sorry about what happened. I do tend to get carried away a bit. But please, this is for you. Take it. And as Norman looks inside the bag, he pulls out a pair of dance shoes and says, wow, these are nice. Thanks. How much do I owe you? And Pohai says, nothing. They just happen to be my favorite pair of dance shoes. And every audition I've ever gone to, when I wore these shoes, I always got the part. So now they're yours. And the luck that came with it is also yours. And Reifsnyder says, wow, okay, thanks. And he leaves. Norman says after that, a couple of the cast members ask him if he wants to go see a movie with them. And he says, well, I only got slippers, but thinks to himself, well, I just got a new pair of dance shoes. And so he wears them. And he jumps into a big old Ford station wagon with a couple of the cast members. And of all places, they're driving out to the west, to a place called the Old Royal Sunset Drive-In. Big outdoor drive-in theater where you park the car up against the speaker that you put on your windshield, you adjust your radio, and then across the parking lot on a huge 700-foot screen is where you watch the movie. That's where he went. Norman said, suddenly, it's the intermission. And I decided to go with a bunch of my friends to the snack bar. We get all the snacks and we're coming back. And I'm standing there waiting for everybody to get in the back seat, and I'm handing them the popcorn and the hot dog and the drinks. And as I'm stepping up to get into the back, he said something that felt like it was under the car. Just grabbed my ankles like this and then pulled him out from under me. He said I fell flat right on my butt, and immediately I went numb. I couldn't feel anything from my lower waist up into my shoulders, and I was in a lot of pain. I was crying. And they were going to bring me to the hospital, but I said, no, bring me home, bring me home. But you're hurt. We got to take you to hospital. No, I insisted, bring me home. He said at the time, I was living at the end of a lane in Kalihi. I lived in a cottage that belonged to this old Hawaiian woman who lived on the lane, Mrs. Manuahi. She was from Molokai, and she was a widow. Her husband had died. And she lived all by herself. And a lot of times when I came home late at night, she'd be sitting on her porch, smoking her rope cigar, and we would exchange alohas, and she would ask me if everything is okay, and if I needed anything. But for some reason, after that happened, in as much pain as I was, I just felt I needed to be taken home. And so they drove me home down the lane in the big station wagon. They carefully, gingerly, as much as possible, took me out of the car. And now they have me on their shoulders, walking towards my old cottage. And they're bouncing too much. And I'm saying, oh, don't bounce, just walk straight. And Mrs. Manuahi comes out of her house and she's standing on the porch. And she said, Hui, what are you folks doing? And one of my friends from the production says, sorry, Auntie, this is our friend Norman. He got hurt tonight. Mrs. Manuahi says, oh, no, bring him here. And they bring him on the porch. And she says to the men, lay him down over here on this pune, over there. And they put him down. And he's in a lot of pain. And then Mrs. Manuahi says to the young men, go, you folks go home. They get into the station wagon. They take off. Mrs. Manuahi is carefully observing Norman writhing in pain on her pune'e. And she says, boy, I can help you, but I need your permission. What? I can help relieve your pain, but I need your permission. Oh, yeah, please, anything, yes, please, you have my permission. Mrs. Manuahi brings out this old jar, opens it, and rubs kukui nut oil all over her hands, and says, okay, boy, you do me one favor now. You give Mrs. Manuahi permission to do lomi, Hawaiian massage. I'm going to start from your hips and then all the way down. Is that okay? Oh, yeah, anything. Okay, Mrs. Manoahi, going to put this towel on top of you, and then underneath you, as much as you can, you hemo your pants. Okay? And Norman said he did exactly that. And underneath the towel, Mrs. Manoahi began to lomi. The hips, the thighs, the knees, and then coming down to the calves, the Achilles heel. And then she stops and goes, oh, okay, boy, can you do me one favor? Can you hemo your socks and then your shoes? Hemo, take off. In a lot of pain, Norman does exactly that. And then Mrs. Manoa, he says, now, how you feel? And Norman said he sat up like this and said, wow, I feel great. I mean, there's no more pain. Like it's almost like it never happened. Okay, Micah, good. Boy, do me one favor. You see your kama'a, your shoes? Yeah? Try smell. What? Try smell inside the shoe. Norman thought it was weird, but he thought, okay. He grabbed the shoes like this and went, oh, and started to gag and almost threw up. Mrs. Manoa, he stood there and says, boy, the thing you and smell, what is it? What you think? He says, oh my God, it smells like rotten eggs, but worse. Kind of like sulfur. Yeah, but worse than that. Okay, boy. You sit up and you put on your lole. So Norman sits up and puts his pants on, removes the towel. Mrs. Manoa, he said, boy, you get someone you know like you. Well, no. Not that I can think of. You sure? You no more problem with somebody, some kind of trouble? No. Well, except this guy from this show I'm doing, he tried to jump on me, so I punched him in the eye. Oh. So, whose shoes is this? Well, the guy I was telling you about, he gave me these shoes as an apology. Boy, he never give you the shoes for say he's sorry. He will give you the shoes for put one curse on you. He went too hard. He went spit inside. And then he went send something to hurt you. So whatever will happen to you tonight is because of this. But you watch now. Come, follow me. Norman said he followed Mrs. Manoahi into her house. In a large broom closet she opened, except there was no broom, nothing on the shelves. Inside, he said, was a little hand-set stone altar that had flowers, ferns, and hair, and fingernails, and toenails, and other things he couldn't quite identify. Mrs. Manoahi took the shoes, put it on the stone altar, and said, now, you're going to see. Go home. Everything is okay. The following day, Norman said, when he went to the rehearsal, they had the circle on the stage, and the director said, by the way, Pohai won't be able to make it tonight. He called me about some weird thing happening. Apparently, he was making breakfast, and when he turned around to get more eggs from the refrigerator, he slipped and fell, hit his tailbone. Imagine that. The production goes on. The rehearsals are going good. Everybody's learned their dances, their parts, their songs. And after the rehearsal, Norman is walking by the director's office, and then he hears, oh, Norman. And he looks, and Pohai is coming out of the office. And Norman ignores him and keeps walking. Pohai says, Norman, stop. Norman looks at him and says, what is it? He says, I felt that maybe my shoes were not enough, so I got you this. And I made it myself, and it would mean a lot to me if you would just take it. Pohai, I don't want any more gifts, okay? Whatever it is between us, I forgive you, and let's just get past it. And I don't know what else to say, but I don't want anything. Pohai pushes whatever's in the package into Norman's chest and says, please, it would mean a lot to me if he would just take it. All right. And he takes it. Later that night, Norman says, after rehearsal when he gets home, he sits on his bed, opens the gift that is given to him. And it's a picture that Pohai drew himself in a frame. But as he looks at it, he says, oh my God, why give me this? And I remember asking Norman, well, what was it? And Norman says, Pohai is a brilliant, brilliant artist. I mean, his drawings are so lifelike, but he drew a Hawaiian man and a Hawaiian woman having sex in the middle of this forest, which is obviously somewhere in Hawaiian. But the way he drew it, the way the man and woman are having sex is, he's literally raping her. Like, you can tell it's against her will. And I thought, oh my God. So I just took it and just tossed it on my bed. I sat up late studying my choreography, learning certain parts and the songs, and I was drinking sake, and I fell asleep on the floor. And so I had only time in the morning to take a shower, get dressed to go to work at GEMS, and then, pack all my clothes for rehearsal. Didn't think anything about it. Rehearsal was fine. Everything was great. And then, after rehearsal, late at night, I'm coming home. I caught the bus, I'm walking down the lane, and as I'm walking down the lane, I see Mrs. Manuahi pacing back and forth on her porch. And I looked at her, I said, hi, Mrs. Manuahi, and she jumped and saw me and said, oh boy, come, sit down, over there on the pune'e. And I sat down, and she looked scared, nervous, I couldn't tell. But she said, boy, as long as you've known Mrs. Manuahi, you know that I don't steal, yeah? Well, yeah, of course not. You're practically my landlord. I mean, you help me out, I appreciate it. Okay, so Mrs. Manuahi is not somebody who steals or breaks into people's hale or anything like that. You understand? Yes, Mrs. Manuahi. What is this about? Tonight, boy, I'm sitting here on the pune'e, puhipaka, and I happen to glance across the yard to your hale, your cottage. And inside your bedroom, I can see some sort of red glowing light moving around, back and forth. And then, no more light, the curtain opened, and I see one Hawaiian boy standing inside your bedroom window, looking at me. Oh, akakala. I knew it was one lapu. Whoever that boy is, will send something to you again. So kalamai, please excuse. I pull it to my akua, to my kupuna, and I went inside your hale, inside your bedroom. Norman said, and then Mrs. Manuahi sort of scooted over on her pune'e, reached behind it, and brought out the drawing that was given to him by Pohai. Boy, the one who went tuha inside your kama'a, your shoes, is that the same one when draw this ki'i? Yes. His name is Pohai. Boy, we're gonna burn this pepper first, this drawing, and then I tell you. And so they went, and they burned it. Mrs. Manuahi grabbed the frame like this, smashed it on the side of her railing leading up to the steps. The glass cracked. She took out the paper. And she did Pele. She prayed in Hawaiian. And then she took out a lighter, Norman said, and she lit the picture on fire from the bottom corner. And then placed it on this wooden table outside her house. And Norman said the fire burned on the outside of the paper like this. And then it burned toward the middle. And then the flames, he said, literally surrounded the face of the man and the woman in the picture. And as it burned the woman's face, in pain, in agony, and slowly began to surround the face of the man in the drawing. Just before it burned, Norman said the face went like this. And it was Pohai's face. And then Norman said Mrs. Manoa, he told him, that boy who is doing this to you, he is a bad person. He probably had bad childhood. Make him that way. He doesn't know any other way to express himself when he likes somebody. And so, through this key that he drew and gave to you, that was the way he was going to take you and make you his. If you came from your rehearsal later, and Aino was on my pune, and you went into your hale, and you moi on your bed, that boy who did this to you is uhane, waiting in that bed to take you, because he only knows how to do things through lust. But now, send back. You okay? But before you go inside your hale, you come. I bless you. And Norman said, Mrs. Manoahi gave him the blessing, purified him from any negativity that might have been attached to him. And he went back into his house and slept peacefully. Norman said what he didn't know is that Pohai, the same night this happened, was at home in his apartment. Outside on the lanai, he had potted plants hanging up like this, all inside of a holder. He went out that same night, stood on top of his railing, trying to water his plants. The coroner, the medical examiner, the police surmised that somehow he must have slipped or was about to fall, losing his balance. And as he was about to fall off the railing, he sort of reached forward like this to grab one of the holders holding on to his potted plants. He must have hit it out of the holder. And as he was falling forward, the holder was now coming back toward him, wrapped itself around his neck, and hung him until he died. That's what he found out from the director when he went to rehearsal the following night. The director also said, what was strange about that is that the authorities cannot account for the reason as to why Pohai's body was burnt to a crisp. His neighbor upstairs, to the side, on the left and the right, and the one below him, said they heard him screaming bloody murder. One of the neighbors claims that from out in the distance, a huge orb of red flames came shooting, streaking into Pohai's apartment. The screaming stopped, and his body was found hanging from the holder burnt black. According to what Norman Reifsnyder told me way back in 1982, this is exactly as it happened. I have a couple of friends who sort of confirmed the hanging, or the accidental hanging of Pohai. It's a couple of different versions. But what's so strange about Pohai's death as a whole is that Pohai, in the cast of Jesus Christ Superstar, was Judas. And if you've seen that production, if you've seen the movie, you know that at some point during that whole thing, Judas hangs himself. There is a story about a man who used to sit for months, late in the afternoon, on the beach at Ala Moana. And every time he sat there, same time after work, he would always imagine that at some point his son was going to come running up the beach, asking him if they could go to get shave ice at the Waiola's store. The man remembers taking his son, Keaka, to go and get shave ice. And he said, the magical thing about my son was that even at his age, he saw wonder and magic in everything. The glee, the happiness in his eyes as the old Japanese lady would make the mound of shave ice on the cone and then begin to decorate it with all the different colors. It's a beautiful thing to see on my son's face. Maybe for us adults, he said, it was the disparity of being an adult. Because by that time in our lives, we're so focused on so many things, we lose that magic. He said, when he sits on the beach after work, late in the afternoon, he also thinks to himself that he should have never met Keaka's mother. And he said, I'll tell you why. Right after Keaka was born, Estelle suddenly decided that married life was not for her. And she was going to leave. And she did. But the reason why she left is she never got over her high school boyfriend, Braden Pang. And so she pursued him, they got married, and whatever the hell. He said Estelle only surfaced long enough with Braden Pang to attend Keaka's funeral services. And at those funeral services, she publicly declared that my son's death was my fault. And Braden Pang made the mistake of putting in his 2 cents. And I don't know how it happened, but this pair of brass knuckles suddenly appeared in my hand. And I punched Braden Pang in the face, broke his jaw. And at my son's funeral services, of all places, I was arrested for assault. Go figure. I sit here on the beach at Ala Moana Park, late in the afternoon, after I've clocked out of work. And I think to myself, if I only had not taken those 2 seconds to answer my phone about a business call from the office that it turns out could have been answered and taken care of by itself, my son would still be alive. Because in those 2 seconds I stood up and turned around. And I didn't notice the wind that came through the park and blew down the sand and began to blow Keaka's boogie board slowly out to the water. And the more Keaka tried to reach for the boogie board, the more the wind blew it, and the more he reached for it, and the more the wind shifted it away. And when he reached for it the final time, the sand went out from under his feet, and he drowned. By the time I saw it all, it was too late. At work, I just punch in, do my job. When it's lunchtime, I sit in the lounge with the other employees, but I purposely remain antisocial. I don't talk to anyone, smile at anyone, whatever. Punch out, and I come back here. I sit on the sand late in the afternoon, and I just stare out into the water. So, one afternoon as I'm going through my normal routine, I happen to see this Hawaiian woman walking by, and she's only wearing a red and orange bikini, and I kind of half notice her. Then all of a sudden I hear her say, "Ow, ow, ow!" And she just plumps down on the sand, and she pulls up her foot, and I guess she stepped on a sharp shell or a can or something or a glass, because the entire underside of her big toe is cut open, and there's blood everywhere. And so I just sort of walk over to her, and I take out the handkerchief that's in my pocket and wrap it around her toe. Then I see the lifeguard on duty, so I wave him over, and he comes over and does his thing with the first aid kit, and I leave it at that. And I go back and I sit down, watching the water. The following day, it's the same thing. There I am, punched out, late in the afternoon, sitting on the sand, just staring at the water, in the exact spot where I should have been staring and watching when Kiaka drowned. And from my right peripheral, I see something walking towards me. And I finally look in that direction, and it's that Hawaiian woman from the day before. And she says, "Hi, I don't know if you remember me, but my toe's okay." And she lifts up her toe and shows it to me, all bandaged up. And I said, "Oh, okay, well, okay, that's good." And then she sits down, and I get irritated. She says, "So, yeah, I just wanted to say thanks, if that's all right." I said, yeah, thanks very much." She said, "Just thanks for helping me." I said, "Listen, you're not obligated to sit here and keep me company or whatever, you're all bandaged up, and that's fine." And she said, "I noticed you sitting here every day." And she goes like this, "And I notice you stare out there at the water. So, it must be obviously something deep or something painful that you're thinking about." I looked at her, I said, "Excuse me?" She could see my irritation, and she said, No. See, what I mean is that a lot of times I see people come here and they hang out, and for the ones that just stare out at the ocean, it's always some problem or some kind of thing they're trying to get off their shoulder. That's all I'm saying." All right. Well, thanks. And I figured, since you helped me out and you didn't have to, maybe I can help you. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything. If you want, I'll just sit here, keep you company. We don't have to talk. It doesn't have to be anything. And for some reason, she sat there the whole time. Up until 10 o'clock, when HPD rode through on their quads and chased out all the undesirables, the homeless. They finally gave us the signal by coming by in their quads and, gunning the engine. We got the hint, and I got up to leave. As we were walking away, I noticed this Hawaiian woman starting to walk through the park by herself. So I thought I should just go back to my car, but for some reason I asked her, "Listen, you live nearby? You need a ride or anything?" And she said, "No, I'm fine." I said, "I would just feel bad if something happened to you and I didn't offer you a ride, especially if I saw your obituary in the paper tomorrow." And she looked at me like how my mom used to look at me, like if I was telling a lie or something. Then her expression changed and she said, "Okay." So it turns out she lives at that apartment condominium, like at the very end of Richard Street, facing toward Aloha Tower. And I said, so do you walk here every day from here to the Alamona Beach Park? She said, yeah, but it's the kind of walk I need. And she says, by the way, my name is Kalena. I said, hi. The next day at work, well, let me tell you this. Before the next day at work, this guy said he had the best, most deepest, peaceful sleep he's ever had in a long time. Then he said the next day at work, for some reason, it wasn't overboard, but he found himself being friendly to his fellow workers. And he found himself making small talk in the employee lounge. And then, after work, he punched out. By the late afternoon, he was sitting in the same spot at Alamona Beach Park, staring out into the water. And he says, here comes this woman. She's wearing one of those hoodie sweater shorts, and she has something in a plastic bag, and she sits down and says, hi, so I have some sandwich and some soda. And I said, okay. And for the next 6 months, that's what it was. Just sitting there, saying nothing, and just me staring down the sand at the water. Just like that. But then, other strange things began to happen. I'd be sitting there and I'd have these little flecks of memories, like how Keaka had a hard time finishing his food. Didn't matter if it was breakfast, lunch, or dinner. He wouldn't eat everything on the plate. He had a problem like that. And the way I was taught growing up is whatever's on the plate, you have to eat it all, because there might not be anything tomorrow. And so, one evening, Keaka had on his plate macaroni and cheese. And I was watching the time, because again, he was at the table longer than he should have been. And I was waiting for the moment when I'd have to go walk in there and go through another struggle. But when I got there, his plate was clean. And he was sitting there with a smile on his face. He said, look, Dad, I ate everything on my plate. I ate everything. He was so excited, and I was happy. I picked him up and I hugged him. I said, wow, man, that is great. That is just awesome. And he laughs and he's happy. I can see he's gleeful about it. And as he's laughing, he lets a fart rip, and it's a skin slapper. And it was so funny. I started laughing too. Oh my God, I completely forgot about that memory. It just slipped my mind. But then other things would happen too that I sort of forgotten. You know, the first time I had to spank him because he wasn't listening. Man, when that happened, when I had to spank him, I had such a hard time sleeping. It just bothered me. I mean, I felt so guilty about it. And then the first time I had to switch him from pajamas because he was getting too big for him. And I had to make him realize it was okay to sleep in shorts and a shirt. He had a struggle with that. And then he had this thing about socks. He wouldn't wear socks that didn't have the white thing around the toe for some reason. I don't know what it was. And just all those small things just kept coming back. And so after 6 months, late afternoon, sitting on the beach, looking down the sand at the water. Same routine. We leave when the park is closing. Kalena, I take her to her condominium apartment, and I drop her off. And just as she's about to get out of the car, I just suddenly blurt out, my son died because of me. And she said, what? I said, Keaka died, and it was my fault. And she got back in the car and she said, okay, I'm listening. And I told her it just was one of our routine Saturdays, and I got him a brand new boogie board, and he was like not more than 5 feet away from me in the water on the boogie board. And I took this phone call and I just turned around for a second. Just a second. And I guess the wind came and just started moving the boogie board, and he went after it. and it just got too deep and he drowned. But I wasn't crying. She was crying. Abruptly, she got out of the car and went in. And this is 6 months later, clocked out of work, sitting on the sand, watching the water. And she comes, and she says, "Can we take a walk today?" I said, "All right. Anywhere in particular?" She says, "Just around." As I begin to cross the street, she says, "Now I know why you come here every day." I said, "You do?" She said, "Yeah. And I think you have to admit to yourself why you come here too. Every day. I think you know." And I finally said to her, "Come here every day, and I sit on the sand, watching the water, because I just think if Kiaka can see that I'm paying attention, maybe he'll forgive me." And quickly she grabbed me and we walked across the street, through the park. She pulled something out of her sweater pocket. It was this envelope. And she handed it to me. And she said, "Years ago, my husband committed suicide. He was conflicted about what he was raised with, what he was culturally, as opposed to what his family wanted him to be religiously. And he couldn't rectify the two. And so he killed himself." And then she said to me, "If I had known you before the day that your son drowned, I would have saved him." And it seems weird, but I wouldn't have to be here with you having this conversation. And she handed me the envelope and she said, "Please, please, please promise me that you won't read this until you get home. Please." I said, "Okay. I promise." She said goodbye. And I watched her walk off and disappear into the darkness of the Ala Moana beach bar. When I got home, in the envelope was some yellow stenopad notepaper. The other thing was an old newspaper article from a Maui newspaper. It was all in Hawaiian, and I realized the handwriting on the yellow stenopad paper was hers. It was a translation. The article was talking about a man who lived in Nahiku, a Hawaiian man named Kaha, and his wife. Everyone believed that Kaha was part man and part shark, as was his wife. His kahu, his caretakers, who would go and feed him, suddenly became converted to the Western religion. And they started going to that church, and they stopped feeding him. The story goes that one day when he appeared in his human form to be taken care of, his kahu, his caretakers, convinced him that they should take him to that church in Wailuku, the church of the new god. After much consternation, Kaha agreed. The people went by horse and carriage. It was almost a 3-day trip from Nahiku all the way to Wailuku. But they said the funny thing is when they got to Wailuku, to that church, Kaha was already there, waiting. They crossed through the gate, walking up the lane to the church door, where the pastor was waiting. And they all stood there waiting for Kaha to join them. And the newspaper article said As Kaha went through the gate, his body began to contort, began to change, and that Kaha died right there in his half-human, half-shark form. And when they saw that, what happened to Kaha, they were horrified. But then they heard this horrific high shrill scream. It was so deafening that it nearly broke their eardrums. But when they looked, standing at the gate was Kaha's wife, Kalena. She destroyed the gate to the church. And she destroyed the opening to the door of the church. Horrified, the people watched as Kalena picked up her husband, Kaha, in his half-human, half-shark form, as she dove into the waters of Wailuku, never to be seen again. At the very end of that yellow steno pad notepaper, under all the translation, in her own handwriting, Kalena said, "Thank you for letting me sit and heal alongside you." Kalena. I want to thank all of you also for joining us these past Friday nights. I hope we're doing good by all of you, and I hope you've been enjoying it. I'm very glad how much of you like it, follow it, make comments. And so I want to say aloha to people from Guam, to Ottawa, Canada. That's far away. To our brothers and sisters in the Philippines. Are you from Olongapo, Sekior? Please tell us where. Portland, Oregon, Maui, Waimanalo, Reno, Nevada, the Bay Area, Las Vegas, Kauai, Mano, Kalanipo, Waianae, my hometown, yay, Makakilo. Also, mahalo for purchasing Eola Ikamahina, our shirts. I'm glad you guys really like it, and like I was saying, once all of you get those shirts, we got to do a thing where all of you check in and we get to see everybody. I think that will be great. And also, Arizona. Also, mahalo for everyone's continuous support. PayPal, Venmo, donations, T-shirts, watching, sharing, and our brand new Kapumoe shirts, or the Nightmarcher shirts. Those are available for purchase. Thank you so much. For those of you who jumped on it, I think midnight sometime last night. That's crazy. Kent, Washington. Kent, Washington, is that anywhere near Forks? You know, where they all sparkle? Can you let me know? Any comments really quick, because we got a minute?
Yeah.
1975.
No.
Maui. Yeah, Maui. What about it?
Do you know any stories from Maui?
Yeah, next week for sure. Huaka'i trails in Makakilo, Palehua, the Mo'o Trail, the Nightmarcher Trail. Have I visited haunted places on the mainland? Yes, in Orlando, Florida. It was maddening. Have you visited a witched cemetery in the mainland? I have not, but I'd like to. Would you like to host us so we can go live? That would be crazy, don't you think? Triple Army Hospital. My brother was there in Vietnam when he got shot through the face. I remember going there as a kid, and I remember actually seeing Hawaiian warriors walking through that cafeteria in the middle of the morning. The last time I was there, it was not a good feeling, and as you all know, it's built on a hale'iwi, a house of bones, sort of as a warning to anybody else who would mess with that ali'i, that this is what was going to happen. Moanalua itself is a very spiritually active place, and we may talk more about Moanalua next week. But listen, all of you, thank you so much. I bless all of you for participating, for watching us, and please have a peaceful sleep. Hui hou. Aloha.